Many people argue against the idea of living in the moment these days because it doesn't make sense to everyone. The suggestion could confuse some people when considering things in that way. In fact, we spoke about the shackles of life in the last video, and touched on how some people could be trapped in eternal present. Now, do you still think living in the moment is good advice? I don't think you do either. Like me, don't trap yourself to the eternal present. So, is there any way we can live in the future other than living in the present? The answer is yes, there is a way. In fact, not only do we have a way to live in the future, we must also live in the future. Living in the present can be difficult because it prevents people from focusing on the future. Living in the past, however, is an even worse alternative because living that way traps us with memories that will never go away. That's true, we should be living in the future, and we can do that to some degree while we're still struggling. So how will we live in the future? That's a question to ask, and as you'll see, it's not as mysterious as you think. I've listed these 7 points below to provide some guidance on the subject. First, you need to have a prediction for the future. Second, that prediction takes time to get results. Third, you are confident that your predictions are correct. Fourth, so you act, choose, and think in advance according to the predicted result. Fifth, you will eventually come to the moment when the result appears. Sixth, finally prove that your prediction is correct. Seventh, then, because you act, choose, and think in advance according to the correct results in the future, a part of your life is of living in the future for a long period of time. At this point, everyone may have noticed that the first step in living in the future is to make predictions. So let's first look at a simple prediction, mainly in the following 4 elements. 1. In the long run, we'll be able to produce more with our minds than we can with our hands, and the capacity of human minds will always be higher. Point 2. Brain growth is still an unknown factor in most of our lives, making it difficult to predict. But physical growth is still very obvious. Point 3. The time of physical decline comes very early, and the time of mental decline comes much later. 4. Profits are becoming less common, as the general trend is that more knowledge is having greater profit potential. You might be thinking, aren't the above 4 obvious things? This is not a prediction. But the fact is, these 4 predictions were excerpted from books and magazines when I was in the 2nd year of junior high school and wrote them in my diary. Teehee Media were promoting, knowledge is power. Technology is productivity. At that time, the truth must be right even if I didn't seem to be feeling it at the time. It is concluded that in the future, perhaps in the near future, perhaps in the very far future, there will definitely be clear and significant effects. Anyway, it may be difficult to change people's minds about the advice I give them because I believe in it so much. Years later, when I thought about this matter again, one thing that stood out to me was how much knowledge I had accumulated since then. When I looked back on all the things that I had learned in the years since, I realized that this concept was right, living in the future, and I achieved and learned how powerful living in the future. In general, life is always just in the present moment. Therefore, when people say living in the future, what they're really saying is only living in the future as it relates to your brain. If you think about them and think they make sense, then you should believe in them and be accountable for your life according to that. One day, principles you've previously believed in will appear as if they are appearing, and you'll see for yourself that you were right about them. You have done it for a long time, when others are still stuck in the present, but you are living in the future. Of course, living in the future can bring you a wonderful harvest, but, inevitably, there will be uncertainty. It's important to keep in mind that you'll never know exactly what tomorrow brings. If living in the future had been achieved even once in your lifetime, you will be happy and profit is unimmigrable. However, this sort of unpredictability can make for a more interesting life. The crux of the matter is that once you start this mode, it's so easy to get used to and you can't stop, because living in the future is getting easier for you. Your brain will automatically live in the future. We can make a prediction. At the end, people who live in the future must have accumulate more wealth than those who live in the present. In fact, the reason is very simple, because the so-called investment is not to exchange current resources for future resources. Therefore, those who live in the future must have more wealth than those who live in the present. Well, today I tell you about the importance of living in the future and the 7 steps to living in the future. You have to predict the future. That prediction takes time to get results. You are confident that your predictions are correct. So you act, choose, and think in advance according to the predicted result. You will eventually come to the moment when the result appears, ultimately prove your predictions are correct, then, because you act, choose, and think in advance according to the correct results in the future. A part of your life is living in the future for a long period of time. Think and act. What's the most important correct prediction you've ever made? Why is it so important? What's the biggest prediction you've ever made that didn't ultimately benefit to you? Why is the biggest, and why didn't you benefit from it? In the past 10 or even 20 years, you have also known that knowledge is power and knowledge is money, but why don't you actually pay attention to this truth? What went wrong? Assess the people around you. Who is the most predictive? Think again why you haven't had a deep relationship with him in the past. Why do you rarely have in-depth discussions with him? If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumb up and share with your friend. Thank you for watching.